Black Lady was mocked by her ex at Gala, until the Mafia boss took her hand and said, "You're with me now. You're with me now." The deep voice cut through the air like a blade, silencing the entire ballroom. Isabella felt every eye turned toward them as Dominic Romano, the most feared man in the city, extended his hand to her. The humiliation that had burned her cheeks moments before froze in place as she stared at his outstretched palm. "I am," she heard herself say, placing her trembling hand in his. The look on Zane's face, her cruel ex who had just publicly mocked her, shifted from smug superiority to barely concealed terror as Dominic's dark eyes locked onto him. "Enjoy your evening, Matthews," Dominic said, his voice deceptively soft yet carrying an unmistakable threat. "I certainly will." Have you ever wished someone would step in and rescue you from your darkest moment? That instant when you're drowning in humiliation and suddenly, unexpectedly, everything changes? If you've ever been underestimated or looked down upon by someone who thought they were better than you, this story will resonate deep in your soul. I'm Lucy, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of how one woman's moment of humiliation transformed into an unexpected journey of power, protection, and perhaps even love. A story that proves sometimes our lowest moments can lead to our greatest transformations. Isabella Roberts smoothed the silk of her emerald gown, a momentary distraction from the knot tightening in her stomach. The Blackwell Foundation Gala glittered around her, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across the ballroom, champagne flutes clinking, laughter rising and falling like music. She hadn't wanted to come, but as the newly appointed director of the city's most prestigious art restoration program, her presence was expected. What she hadn't expected was Zane Matthews. 5 years had passed since he'd walked away, leaving nothing but hollow promises and the echo of his words, "You're too ordinary for someone like me." 5 years of rebuilding herself, of transforming pain into purpose. Yet seeing him across the room, still devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his arm draped possessively around a willowy blonde, made her feel as though no time had passed at all. Isabella hadn't always moved in elite circles. Growing up in a modest neighborhood with parents who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, she'd earned her way into college through scholarships and determination. Her extraordinary talent for seeing beneath surfaces, for understanding the hidden layers of paintings that others missed, had earned her a reputation as something of a miracle worker in the art restoration world. It was during her sophomore year that she met Zane Matthews, heir to the Matthews publishing fortune. He'd been charming, attentive, seemingly captivated by her passion for art and her unique perspective. For 2 years, Isabella believed she'd found someone who valued her for exactly who she was. "You see the world differently," he'd told her once, tracing her cheekbone with his finger. "It's what makes you special." But as graduation approached and reality intruded, Zane's true colors emerged. The invitations to family events never materialized. The subtle comments about her clothes, her accent, her lack of connections accumulated. And finally, at a graduation party surrounded by his friends, he'd ended things with brutal efficiency. "You're too ordinary for someone like me," he'd said, not even bothering to lower his voice. "It was fun while it lasted, but let's be realistic about your place in the world." Those words had haunted Isabella for 5 years. 5 years during which she'd thrown herself into her work, restoring damaged masterpieces with such skill that the art world began to take notice. Her hands could coax faded colors back to life, repair tears that seemed irreparable, reveal the original beauty beneath centuries of grime and neglect. When she was appointed director of the Metropolitan Museum's prestigious restoration program at just 28, it should have been the ultimate validation. Yet standing in the Blackwell Foundation Gala, surrounded by the city's elite in their designer clothes and family jewels, Isabella still felt like an imposter, a feeling Zane's cutting remarks would soon intensify. Isabella took a steadying breath and turned away from the sight of Zane, focusing instead on the elaborate ice sculpture centerpiece. She could do this. One evening of professional networking, then she could retreat to her quiet apartment where half-finished canvases and the comforting smell of linseed oil awaited. Well, look who decided to emerge from obscurity. Zane's voice, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as intoxicating, froze her in place. She turned slowly, composing her features into what she hoped was polite indifference. Zane. I didn't expect to see you here. Her voice remained steady, a small victory. The Matthews family has supported the Blackwell Foundation for generations, he replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Unlike some of us who are clearly new to these circles. The blonde beside him tittered, her gaze sweeping dismissively over Isabella's gown, the one she'd spent months saving for, the one that had made her feel, for the first time in years, beautiful. Isabella works in art restoration, Zane explained to his companion, his tone making it sound like she swept gallery floors. We dated briefly in college. Before I understood the importance of compatible backgrounds. Each word landed like a precise cut, reopening wounds Isabella had thought long healed. She felt heat rising to her cheeks, aware of nearby conversations quieting as people turned to watch the uncomfortable exchange. It was lovely seeing you again, she managed, preparing to retreat with whatever dignity remained. Leaving so soon? Zane's voice carried just enough to ensure others would hear. I suppose these events can be overwhelming for someone more accustomed to simpler gatherings. The blonde on his arm laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Darling, not everyone is built for this world. It's actually sweet that she tried. Have you ever had to face someone who once broke your heart? Someone who still had the power to make you feel small? I want you to hit that like button right now if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you wish the ground would open up and swallow you whole. Isabella felt the room closing in, the weight of curious stares pressing against her skin. This was exactly why she'd avoided the city's social scene for years, why she'd poured herself into her work instead of relationships. In this moment, she would have given anything to disappear. Then the atmosphere shifted. A ripple of tension moved through the crowd, conversations faltering mid-sentence. The change was subtle but unmistakable, like the sudden stillness before a storm. Isabella followed the collective gaze to the entrance of the ballroom. Dominic Romano had arrived. Even those who didn't recognize him immediately sensed his presence. He moved with the quiet confidence of a predator, his dark eyes missing nothing. At 38, he commanded the Romano Empire with ruthless efficiency, his reputation for both brilliance and brutality well earned. The official story was that he ran a legitimate business conglomerate. The whispered truth was far more complex. Dominic Romano was not a man who appeared at social gatherings without purpose. His presence at charity events was rare, his interactions with the social elite calculated and brief. He donated generously but anonymously, avoiding the spotlight that others craved. Some said he'd built his empire on the ruins of his father's more openly criminal enterprises, transforming it into something that could operate in daylight. Others insisted the legitimacy was merely a veneer, that beneath the polished surface of Romano Industries lay the same ruthless operations that had made his family name both feared and respected for generations. What no one disputed was his power. When Dominic Romano entered a room, people noticed. When he spoke, people listened. When he wanted something, obstacles had a way of disappearing. Isabella had never met him, knew him only from newspaper photographs and hushed conversations. Yet as he scanned the room, his gaze locked with hers across the crowded space, and something electric passed between them. It was as though he had been looking for her specifically, as though the entire purpose of his rare appearance was this moment of connection. Without breaking eye contact, Dominic began moving toward her, the crowd parting instinctively before him. His focus was absolute, as though the glittering assembly had faded to insignificance. Isabella felt rooted to the spot, caught in the gravity of his approach. Zane's smirk faltered as he registered the shift in attention. "What's Romano doing here?" he muttered, his arm tightening around his date. The blonde's expression changed from smug superiority to wary calculation. I didn't know the Blackwell Foundation associated with his type, she whispered, not quite quietly enough. Dominic stopped directly before Isabella, his presence commanding the space around them. Up close, she could see the faint scar that traced his jawline, the intensity that radiated from him like heat. He was not conventionally handsome, his features too sharp, too uncompromising, but there was something magnetic about him that transcended mere appearance. Isabella Roberts, he said, her name in his deep voice sounding like something precious. She blinked in surprise. You know who I am? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I make it my business to know extraordinary people. The simple statement, delivered with such quiet certainty, did more to restore Isabella's shattered confidence than any reassurance could have. In Dominic Romano's eyes, she wasn't small or insignificant. She was extraordinary, and he had come looking for her specifically. Before she could process this, Dominic's attention shifted to Zane, his expression cooling several degrees. Matthews. I see your father still buys your way into these events. The color drained from Zane's face, then rushed back in an angry flush. The history between the two men was palpable, some old wound that had never properly healed. My family has a legitimate place here, Romano. Unlike some, Zane retorted, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Legitimate. Dominic repeated the word with quiet amusement. An interesting choice of terminology. The tension between them crackled like electricity, laden with unspoken threats and old grievances. Isabella stood between them, suddenly aware that she had become the focal point of something much larger than a social humiliation. Then, to her astonishment, Dominic turned back to her and extended his hand. You're with me now, he said, his voice low but carrying enough for those nearby to hear. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really an invitation. It was a declaration, to her, to Zane, to everyone watching. The implications hung in the air between them, dangerous and thrilling. Isabella should have been offended by his presumption. Should have politely declined and walked away. Instead, she found herself placing her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the surprising gentleness of his grip. I am, she agreed, the words emerging with unexpected certainty. Something flashed in Dominic's eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or something deeper. He guided her hand to rest in the crook of his arm, a gesture both protective and possessive. Enjoy your evening, Matthews, he said without looking back, leading Isabella away from her ex and toward the terrace doors. Behind them, Isabella could feel the weight of stairs, could almost hear the furious whispers beginning. In a single moment, she had gone from social outcast to the chosen companion of the most dangerous man in the room. The implications would ripple through the city's elite circles by morning. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling tension of the ballroom. Isabella drew a deep breath, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. Dominic Romano, the Dominic Romano, had just claimed her publicly, rescuing her from humiliation while simultaneously throwing her into an entirely new kind of danger. Why did you do that? She asked when they were alone on the moonlit terrace. Dominic studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Matthews has always taken pleasure in diminishing others to elevate himself. It's a character flaw I find distasteful. That doesn't explain why you intervened on my behalf specifically. He turned to face the garden below, his profile sharp against the night sky. Perhaps I've been watching you longer than you realize, Isabella. The admission sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. Watching me? The Bellini restoration at the Metropolitan last year. Your work on the damaged Caravaggio after the museum fire. The lecture series you gave on Renaissance pigment authentication. His gaze returned to her, intense and unwavering. You see beneath surfaces, find what others miss, restore what seems beyond saving. It's remarkable. Isabella stared at him, speechless. Her work was specialized, appreciated mainly in academic circles. The idea that someone like Dominic Romano had not only noticed but followed her career was bewildering. "You're surprised," he observed. "I didn't think someone in your position would have interest in art restoration." A shadow of something, amusement, perhaps, crossed his face. "Someone in my position? And what position would that be, exactly?" Isabella hesitated, suddenly aware of dangerous ground. "Business. Corporate leadership. Is that what they're calling it these days?" His smile was brief but genuine. "Let's say I appreciate the value of preserving beautiful things, of recognizing worth others overlook." The way he looked at her as he spoke made her heart beat faster. There was something in his gaze that suggested he wasn't just talking about art. 3 years ago, he continued, his voice dropping lower, there was an exhibition of restored Renaissance works at the Gardner Museum. You gave a lecture on the ethical considerations of restoration versus preservation. You said something that stayed with me. Isabella searched her memory. "I give many lectures. You said, the greatest art doesn't hide its scars, it incorporates them into something more beautiful than the original perfection." You were speaking about a Botticelli that had been damaged during World War II, but the philosophy resonated. He turned slightly, and in the moonlight, Isabella could see more clearly the scar that traced his jawline, disappearing beneath his collar. She wondered suddenly about the story behind it, about what other scars might be hidden beneath his immaculate suit. "I began following your work after that," Dominic admitted. "At first out of intellectual curiosity. Then out of something more personal." "Personal?" Isabella echoed, her pulse quickening. "I have a private collection. Pieces acquired over generations, some through means that wouldn't bear close scrutiny. Many need the kind of restoration only someone with your particular talents could provide." "So this is about my professional skills?" Isabella wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or disappointed. Dominic's gaze intensified. "It began that way. But then I saw you with Matthews at the Riverside Gallery opening last year. I saw how he spoke to you, how he deliberately undermined you in front of the curator. I saw the pain he caused, and the dignity with which you carried yourself afterward." Isabella remembered that night, another humiliating encounter with Zane, another evening spent questioning her worth. She hadn't known anyone had noticed. Hadn't known anyone had cared. "You've been watching me for a year?" The realization should have frightened her. Instead, she felt an unexpected warmth spreading through her chest. "Longer," Dominic admitted. "I've seen how hard you've worked. How you've transformed yourself from the girl Matthews discarded into someone extraordinary. And I've seen how, despite everything you've accomplished, he still has the power to make you doubt yourself. I want you to think about this for a moment. Have you ever had someone see your true worth when you couldn't see it yourself? Someone who recognized your value when others tried to diminish it? Comment below with your experience, I read every single one." "What happens now?" Isabella asked quietly. "Now," Dominic said, offering his arm once more, "we return to the gala. You'll be seen with me. People will talk. Matthews will seethe. And tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to show you my private collection. There's a damaged Titian that's been waiting for the right hands." Isabella knew she stood at a crossroads. Walking back into that ballroom on Dominic Romano's arm would change everything, her reputation, her carefully constructed independence, perhaps even her safety. The rational choice was clear. Yet as she looked up at him, this dangerous, complex man who had seen her when she was invisible, Isabella found herself reaching for his arm. "I'd like that," she said simply. As they re-entered the ballroom, the crowd parted before them like water. Isabella felt Zane's stunned gaze following their progress, but for the first time in years, his opinion meant nothing. She was with Dominic Romano now, for tonight, for tomorrow, and for whatever mysterious future that entailed. And strangely, it felt like coming home. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Where before Isabella had felt like an outsider, now she found herself at the center of attention, not for her own accomplishments, but as the woman on Dominic Romano's arm. It should have bothered her, this reduction to an accessory. Yet there was something different in how Dominic presented her to others. Isabella Roberts, he would say, the woman who restored the Caravaggio after the fire. Her work on pigment authentication is revolutionizing the field. Each time, he emphasized her achievements, her expertise, her value beyond her connection to him. And each time, Isabella felt herself standing a little taller, speaking a little more confidently, owning her place in this world that had seemed so impenetrable just hours before. When they encountered the museum's board chairman, a man who had barely acknowledged Isabella's existence at previous events, Dominic's hand pressed lightly against the small of her back. "Charles," Dominic greeted him. "I was just telling Isabella how fortunate the Metropolitan is to have secured her talents. Her restoration techniques are unparalleled." The chairman blinked rapidly, clearly recalibrating his assessment of Isabella's importance. "Yes, of course. Ms. Roberts has been a tremendous asset to our institution. I'm particularly interested in her approach to the damaged Venetian works," Dominic continued smoothly. "Perhaps you could ensure she has the resources to expand that department?" It wasn't a question, despite its phrasing. The chairman nodded quickly. "Absolutely. We've been meaning to discuss increased funding for that initiative." Isabella fought to keep her expression neutral, though inside she was reeling. The Venetian restoration project had been her passion for months, consistently underfunded and deprioritized despite her advocacy. Now, with a few words from Dominic, it had suddenly become a priority. As they moved away, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Dominic replied, his eyes scanning the room with practiced vigilance. "But your work deserves proper support. And Charles responds well to persuasion." The word carried weight, implications that Isabella chose not to examine too closely. Instead, she allowed herself to enjoy this newfound power, this strange alliance that had transformed her evening from nightmare to dream. It was nearly midnight when they finally encountered Zane again. He had been watching them from a distance all evening, his expression growing darker with each introduction, each laugh, each moment that Isabella shone in Dominic's company. Now, as they prepared to leave, he intercepted them near the coat check, his date conspicuously absent. "Isabella," he said, his voice tight with forced pleasantry. "I didn't realize you and Romano were acquainted." Before she could respond, Dominic's hand tightened slightly on hers. "There's a great deal you don't realize about Isabella, Matthews. It's been your loss for years." Zane's jaw clenched. "I'm sure you think you know what you're doing, Isabella, but Romano isn't what he seems. His family, his business." "Careful," Dominic interrupted, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable edge. "You're treading on dangerous ground." "I'm concerned for an old friend," Zane insisted, though his eyes betrayed his fear. "Isabella deserves to know exactly who she's associating with." Isabella felt something shift inside her, a final breaking of whatever hold Zane had maintained over her self-worth. "I know enough," she said calmly. "I know he sees value in me that you never did. I know he respects my work. And I know that tonight, when you tried to humiliate me, he was the one who stepped forward." "Out of what? Chivalry?" Zane laughed, though the sound was strained. "Men like Romano don't do anything without calculation. Whatever he wants from you is not your concern," Dominic finished. "Good night, Matthews. As they walked away, Isabella could feel Zane's eyes boring into her back, could almost taste his frustration and confusion. The woman he had so casually discarded, so confidently mocked, was now beyond his reach, protected by someone even he dared not challenge. Outside, Dominic's car waited at the curb, a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows and a driver who appeared from nowhere to open the door. Before helping her inside, Dominic paused, studying her face in the gentle glow of the street lamps.
"Are you all right?" he asked, and the genuine concern in his voice surprised her. I don't know what I am," Isabella admitted. "Tonight has been surreal. Do you regret it? Accepting my hand?" She considered the question seriously. "No," she finally said. "I don't regret it at all." Something in his expression softened. "Good. Because I've waited a long time to offer it." The drive to Isabella's apartment was quiet, the city lights streaming past the windows like stars. She lived in a modest building in a transitional neighborhood, the best she could afford on her museum salary while still having space for her own small studio. As the car pulled up outside, she felt a momentary embarrassment, imagining how it must look to someone like Dominic. "Thank you for tonight," she said, gathering her courage. "For stepping in when you did." "The pleasure was mine," he replied, and there was something in his voice that made her believe him. "About tomorrow, my offer to show you my collection stands, but only if you're comfortable." Isabella hesitated. The rational part of her brain screamed caution. Dominic Romano was dangerous, everyone knew it. His world was not hers, his power built on foundations she could only guess at. And yet, "What time?" she heard herself ask. A smile touched his lips, a real one this time, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "I'll send a car at noon, if that suits you." "It does." The driver opened her door, and Dominic stepped out first, offering his hand to help her from the car. At her building entrance, he paused. "One more thing, Isabella." His voice had returned to its usual controlled cadence. "After tonight, there will be talk. Speculation. Some of it, unkind." "I'm used to gossip," she said, though they both knew this would be different. "This will be more than gossip. Being associated with me comes with complications. If you'd prefer to reconsider tomorrow." "I won't," she interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I'm curious about your collection. About you. The rest doesn't matter." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Until tomorrow, then." Isabella watched as he returned to his car, moving with that same predatory grace that had first caught her attention in the ballroom. Only when the vehicle had disappeared around the corner did she finally enter her building, her mind whirling with the implications of the evening. In her apartment, she kicked off her heels and stood before the mirror, still wearing the emerald gown that had witnessed her humiliation and her unexpected triumph. She looked different somehow, her eyes brighter, her posture straighter, as though Dominic's belief in her worth had physically transformed her. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "Sleep well, extraordinary Isabella. D." She smiled, tracing the words with her fingertip. Whatever tomorrow might bring, whatever complications might arise from her association with Dominic Romano, tonight had changed something fundamental within her. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. If you've ever had a moment that completely changed how you saw yourself, hit that subscribe button now. This story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens when Isabella steps fully into Dominic's world. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through Isabella's curtains as she prepared for her meeting with Dominic. She chose her outfit carefully, professional but elegant, a cream silk blouse and tailored trousers that spoke of confidence without trying too hard. As she applied her makeup, her phone buzzed with notifications, dozens of them, from colleagues, acquaintances, even old friends who had fallen out of touch. All asking variations of the same question, "Are you really with Dominic Romano?" She ignored them all, focusing instead on the day ahead. Whatever was happening between her and Dominic, and she wasn't entirely sure what that was, it was too new, too fragile to be dissected by curious onlookers. At precisely noon, her building's security desk called to announce a car waiting. Outside, she found not the sleek black vehicle from the previous night, but a vintage Bentley, its deep blue exterior gleaming in the sunlight. The driver, an older man with silver hair and watchful eyes, greeted her by name. "Ms. Roberts. Mr. Romano is expecting you." The drive took them out of the city, through winding roads flanked by old-growth trees, to an estate hidden behind imposing stone walls. As they passed through wrought iron gates, Isabella caught her first glimpse of Dominic's home, a sprawling stone mansion that seemed to belong to another era, another world entirely. Dominic himself waited on the steps, dressed more casually than she had seen him before, dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that softened his severe features. When he smiled at her approach, Isabella felt that same unexpected warmth spreading through her chest. "You came," he said simply, as though he had half expected her to change her mind. "I said I would." She accepted his offered hand, stepping from the car with more confidence than she felt. "Most people say many things to me that they don't mean," Dominic replied. "Fear has that effect." Isabella met his gaze directly. "I'm not afraid of you." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. "Then you're either very brave or very foolish. Come. Let me show you what I've been wanting to share with you for so long." He led her through the mansion's grand entrance hall, past rooms filled with antique furniture and modern security systems, an intriguing blend of old-world elegance and contemporary vigilance. Isabella noticed the subtle presence of staff, a housekeeper disappearing through a side door, a man with the unmistakable bearing of security personnel nodding respectfully as they passed. "Your home is beautiful," she said, taking in the soaring ceilings and intricate woodwork. "It's been in my family for generations," Dominic replied. "Though I've made some modifications to suit my particular needs." They descended a wide staircase to what appeared to be a converted basement level, though basement seemed an inadequate term for the space that opened before them. Climate-controlled, perfectly lit, with state-of-the-art security visible at every entrance, it was a private museum that would make many public institutions envious. "My collection," Dominic said simply, watching her face as she took in the treasures surrounding them. Isabella moved forward as if in a trance, her professional eye immediately cataloging the extraordinary works displayed with such care. Renaissance masterpieces hung alongside ancient artifacts, contemporary sculptures shared space with illuminated manuscripts. It was eclectic, valuable beyond measure, and curated with obvious passion. "This is incredible," she breathed, stopping before a small Botticelli that she recognized from art history textbooks, a piece long thought lost to time. "How did you?" "Some were inherited," Dominic said, moving to stand beside her. "Others acquired through various means over the years. My family has always appreciated beauty, though not always through legitimate channels." The admission hung between them, neither apology nor boast, simply fact. Isabella turned to study his face, finding him watching her with that same intense focus she remembered from the gala. "Is this what you wanted to show me? Your collection?" "Part of it." He gestured for her to follow him deeper into the gallery, to a separate room with specialized lighting and restoration equipment that rivaled her lab at the museum. "This is what I hoped might interest you professionally." On a large work table lay the Titian he had mentioned, a damaged canvas depicting a scene from classical mythology. Even in its compromised state, the mastery was evident, the colors still vibrant in the undamaged sections. "The fire damage occurred in the 1940s, Dominic explained. Previous restoration attempts were inadequate. I've been waiting for someone with the right touch to bring it back to life. Isabella approached the painting reverently, her trained eye immediately assessing the damage, the possibilities, the challenges. This would be months of work. Delicate, painstaking work. I'm a patient man, Dominic replied. When something matters, I'm willing to wait. The way he looked at her as he spoke made it clear he wasn't just talking about the painting. Isabella felt her cheeks warm, but kept her focus professional. The museum wouldn't approve of me taking on private clients, especially with pieces of uncertain provenance. The museum doesn't need to know. And I can make it worth your while. Isabella shook her head. It's not about money. Then what is it about, Isabella? Dominic moved closer, his presence both intimidating and magnetic. What do you want that I can give you? The question was layered with meaning, possibilities stretching between them like invisible threads. Isabella considered her answer carefully. Honesty, she finally said. If we're going to work together, if I'm going to be associated with you in any capacity, I need to know who you really are. Not the rumors, not the whispers. The truth. Dominic was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gestured to a pair of chairs in the corner of the room. Sit with me, he said. And I'll tell you a story few people have heard. As they settled into the chairs, Isabella noticed for the first time a slight stiffness in his movements, as though an old injury troubled him. Another scar beneath the surface, she thought. My grandfather founded what became the Romano Empire, Dominic began, his voice taking on a different quality, less controlled, more reflective. He came to this country with nothing, built a business through means that were necessary for survival then, but that I've spent years trying to legitimize. My father expanded that empire, but held to the old ways. When he died, when he was killed, I inherited not just wealth and power, but blood debts and vendettas. Killed? Isabella echoed softly. Dominic's jaw tightened. By a business associate who thought our family had grown too powerful. A man named Edward Matthews. The revelation hit Isabella like a physical blow. Zane's father? His uncle. The family resemblance is striking. Dominic's hand moved unconsciously to the scar along his jawline. I was 22 when it happened. Present for the meeting that turned into an ambush. I survived. My father didn't. I'm so sorry, Isabella said, understanding now the tension she had witnessed between Dominic and Zane at the gala. The Matthews family was never directly implicated. They had alibis, connections and law enforcement. But in certain circles, the truth was known. Dominic's eyes had taken on a distant quality, as though seeing into the past. I made choices then that I've spent years trying to balance. Choices that secured my position but compromised what I wanted the Romano name to become. And what is that? What do you want it to become? His focus returned to her, sharp and present. Legitimate. Respected, not feared. A foundation for something that can last beyond my lifetime without the stain of its origins. Is that possible? Isabella asked gently. I don't know, he admitted. But I've been trying. Transforming our holdings, cutting ties with certain operations, building new ones. It's why I rarely appear at events like last night's gala. The old associations follow me, make the transition more difficult. Then why did you come? Why risk it? Dominic leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. Because you were there. Because after watching you from a distance for so long, seeing how you've transformed yourself despite Matthew's attempts to diminish you, I needed, to finally meet you properly. The admission hung between them, raw and honest in a way Isabella hadn't expected. This powerful, dangerous man had been drawn to her not just for her professional skills, but for something more personal, a recognition of shared experience, perhaps, or a quality he saw in her that resonated with his own journey. "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now that we've met?" "That depends on you," Dominic replied. "I won't pretend association with me is without risk. The world I inhabit, even as I try to change it, is not always kind or safe. But if you're willing to take that risk, to help with my collection, to perhaps be seen with me occasionally, I can offer protection, resources for your work, and a promise that no one, especially not Zane Matthews, will ever make you feel small again. If you've ever stood at a crossroads in your life, faced with a choice that could change everything, hit that like button now. And if you want to know what Isabella decides, whether she embraces the danger and possibility of Dominic's world or returns to the safety of her former life, subscribe to Lucy Love Stories. The most unexpected part of this journey is still to come. Isabella considered his words, weighing the risks against the undeniable pull she felt toward this complex, contradictory man. A man who commanded fear yet spoke to her with respect. A man whose world was shadowed by violence yet who appreciated the delicate art of restoration. "I need time," she finally said, "to think about what this means. What I want." Dominic nodded, no disappointment visible in his expression. "Of course. I've waited this long to know you, Isabella. I can wait longer for your decision." As he showed her the rest of his collection, their conversation shifted to safer topics, the provenance of certain pieces, the techniques she might use to restore them, the history they represented. Yet beneath the professional discussion ran an undercurrent of something deeper, a connection forming between them that transcended their different worlds. When it was time for her to leave, Dominic walked her to the waiting car, his hand lightly touching the small of her back in that same protective gesture she remembered from the gala. "Regardless of what you decide about my offer," he said as the driver held the door, "I want you to have this." He pressed a small velvet box into her hand. Inside, Isabella found not jewelry as she had half expected, but a key. "What is this for?" she asked, confused. "A studio I own in the Arts District. Fully equipped for restoration work. It's yours to use, whether or not you decide to work on my collection. Consider it an appreciation of your talent." "Dominic, I can't accept." "You can," he interrupted gently. "No strings attached. No expectations. Just a space where you can work without the constraints of institutional politics." The gift was extravagant yet thoughtful, perfectly aligned with her deepest professional desires. Isabella looked up at him, trying to reconcile this generosity with the reputation that preceded him. "Thank you," she said simply, closing her fingers around the key. Dominic's smile was brief but genuine. "Until we meet again, Isabella." As the car pulled away, Isabella looked back to see him still standing there, a solitary figure framed by the grandeur of his estate. A man of contradictions, of danger and unexpected kindness. A man who had seen her worth when others had not. And despite all rational caution, she found herself already anticipating their next meeting. The following week passed in a blur of activity for Isabella. News of her appearance with Dominic Romano at the Blackwell Gala had spread through the art world like wildfire, transforming her professional standing overnight. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged her now sought her opinion. The museum director, who had previously denied her requests for additional resources, suddenly found room in the budget for her Venetian restoration project. Most telling was the change in how Zane's social circle treated her. Where once they had followed his lead in dismissing her, now they approached with cautious respect, even deference. The power of association with Dominic was undeniable and unsettling in its implications. Through it all, Isabella found herself drawn to the key Dominic had given her, to the promise of a space that was truly hers. On Friday afternoon, unable to resist any longer, she made her way to the address engraved on the key's tag. The building was in the heart of the Arts District, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and abundant natural light. The studio itself took her breath away, spacious, perfectly equipped, with north-facing windows that provided the ideal illumination for restoration work. It was, in every detail, exactly what she would have created for herself had she possessed unlimited resources. As she explored the space, running her fingers over specialized tools and examining the professional-grade lighting system, Isabella noticed a single red rose in a simple glass vase on the workbench. Beside it lay a note in now familiar handwriting. "For when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. The space is yours regardless. D." The gesture touched her deeply, not just the extravagance of the studio itself, but the respect for her autonomy, her need to make this decision on her own terms. It was so different from how Zane had treated her, always pushing, always expecting her to conform to his expectations. Isabella was still contemplating the note when her phone rang, an unknown number that she somehow knew would be Dominic. "You found the studio," he said when she answered, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "It's incredible," she admitted. "Far too generous. It's what you deserve." The simplicity of his statement, the absolute conviction in his voice, made her heart race. "Have you thought about my offer?" Isabella took a deep breath. "I have. And I have conditions. I'm listening. First, my work at the museum continues. Whatever happens between us doesn't interfere with the career I've built." "Agreed," Dominic replied without hesitation. "Second, I need to know that my involvement with your collection stays within legal boundaries. I won't compromise my professional ethics, even for you." There was a brief pause. "I can provide documentation for each piece I ask you to restore. Not all will have perfect provenance, but none will be actively sought by authorities or rightful owners." "Is that acceptable?" Isabella considered. "Yes. And finally, whatever this is between us, this connection, it develops at my pace. No pressure, no expectations beyond what I'm comfortable with." "Of course." His voice softened. "Isabella, I've waited years just to speak with you. I can certainly respect your boundaries now that I have." She closed her eyes, making her decision. "Then yes. I'll help with your collection. And I'd like to see you again. Tonight?" The eagerness in his question made him sound younger, less guarded. "Tonight," she agreed, smiling despite herself. That evening, Dominic took her to a small, exclusive restaurant where they could talk without the scrutiny they'd faced at the gala. Over candlelight, he told her more about his life, the weight of inheriting an empire built on questionable foundations, his determination to transform it into something legitimate, the isolation that came with his position. "People see what they expect to see," he explained, swirling the wine in his glass. "The Romano name carries certain associations. Few bother to look beneath the surface. Like art restoration," Isabella observed. "Most people only see the final result, not the careful work that transforms damage into beauty." Dominic's eyes met hers, warm with understanding. "Exactly like that." As weeks passed, their relationship deepened. Isabella began working on the Titian in her new studio, losing herself in the meticulous process of bringing the damaged masterpiece back to life. Dominic would sometimes visit, watching her work with quiet appreciation, never interrupting, simply present in a way that felt companionable rather than intrusive. They attended select events together, gallery openings, museum fundraisers, his formidable presence beside her a shield against the whispers that still followed them. And gradually, Isabella found herself caring less about those whispers, about what others thought of her association with Dominic Romano. What mattered was how he looked at her when she spoke passionately about her work. How he listened, truly listened, to her ideas and opinions. How he never once made her feel small or insignificant or out of place. It was at the Metropolitan Museum's annual benefit that they encountered Zane again. Isabella had been dreading the meeting, but when it came, she found herself surprisingly calm. Dominic's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, a gesture that had become familiar, comforting. "Isabella," Zane greeted her, his smile tight. "You're looking well. Romano's influence, I presume?" Before she could respond, Dominic spoke, his voice deceptively casual. "Actually, Matthews, Isabella has always been extraordinary. The difference is that now everyone else can see what I've known for years." Zane's expression faltered. "Years? Did you think your opinion was the only one that mattered?" Dominic asked, a dangerous edge beneath his polite tone. "While you were busy dismissing her, I was watching her transform damaged masterpieces with skill few in the world possess. I recognized her value long before that night at the gala." Isabella looked up at Dominic, startled by the revelation. "You never told me it had been that long." His eyes softened as they met hers. Some admiration is best kept private until the moment is right. The truth dawned on Isabella then. Dominic hadn't just stepped in to humiliate Zane that night. He hadn't just been attracted to her talent or intrigued by their chance encounter. He had been watching her, appreciating her, perhaps even falling for her from a distance for years. "You've been protecting me all this time," she whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. The sudden interest in her Venetian project, the opportunities that had mysteriously appeared, the doors that had opened, all Dominic's influence, working silently behind the scenes. "Not protecting," he corrected gently. "Supporting. There's a difference." Zane looked between them, his earlier confidence evaporating as he witnessed the genuine connection between Isabella and the man he had always feared. "I should go," he muttered, retreating without another word. Later that night, standing on the balcony of Dominic's penthouse overlooking the city lights, Isabella finally asked the question that had been forming since their confrontation with Zane. "Why didn't you approach me sooner? Why wait until that night at the gala?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, his profile sharp against the night sky. "I needed to be certain you were ready. That you had built enough of your own strength to stand beside me as an equal, not be overshadowed by who I am." "And that night? What made you finally decide?" He turned to her, his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "When Matthews tried to humiliate you, I saw something in your eyes, not just pain, but defiance. Strength. You were ready to walk away with your dignity intact, even as he tried to strip it from you. In that moment, I knew you were strong enough for what being with me would mean." Isabella stepped closer, drawn to his honesty, his unexpected tenderness. "And what does it mean? Being with you?" "Complications. Scrutiny. Danger, sometimes." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "But also protection. Partnership. Being truly seen for who you are." "You're with me now," she quoted softly, echoing his words from that first night. Dominic's smile was gentle, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "I've always been with you, Isabella. Even when you didn't know it." As his lips met hers in a kiss that felt like coming home, Isabella understood that sometimes life's most beautiful restorations happen not to art, but to ourselves, when someone sees the value beneath our damaged surfaces and helps us become whole again. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Lucy Love Stories. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've ever had someone recognize your worth when others couldn't see it. Remember that sometimes the people who change our lives enter at the most unexpected moments, and true strength often comes from the scars we carry. Until next time, this is Lucy, reminding you that every heart has a story worth telling.